What if the moments that feel like your setbacks are actually your training ground? What if the quiet seasons, the in between times, are where God reshapes your courage and your mindset for what's next? What's up, everybody? I'm Tyson Putthoff, and this is scene 20 of the JesusX30 challenge. We're following my 3-volume book trilogy called Jesus, the Strategic Life and Mission of the Messiah and His Movement. All 3 volumes are out right now in print and ebook, so grab your copies wherever you buy your books. You can also check out electronic versions of the book through platforms like Hoopla, through your public library. So check them out, follow along. In the books, you're going to get a lot more depth than I can give you in these videos, but they both correspond. So check them out. So in John 11 and Luke 14 and 19, we find Jesus stepping out of Jerusalem after Hanukkah of 28 AD and heading into his final spring season, winter and spring season of 29 AD. So he's stepping out of Jerusalem. It's after Hanukkah, and he's crossing the Jordan into Perea to the east. And it looks like a retreat, but it's not. So this city has become pretty dangerous for Jesus. And this is another one of his tactical moves where he's sort of regrouping, but he's also doing some things during this regrouping. He's not just retreating with his disciples to make plans. He's going to continue pressing on in his movement and in his message. And he knows his time is running short, so he shifts from public confrontation to a more private formation stage. He's got to shape his followers for what's about to unfold. He knows what's happening, and he knows where this thing is headed, and where everything is going to come to a head in just a few short months in Passover of 29 AD in Jerusalem. During these months, Jesus' teaching becomes razor sharp. So one of my favorite scenes in the Gospels of all time, Luke 14. Jesus is at what Luke describes as a prominent Pharisee's house for dinner. And he decides, it's Shabbat, it's Sabbath. He decides to heal a man on the Sabbath. And this is a no-no. He's already been in trouble for this before. And then he starts telling parables. Again, this is public in this banquet. He stands up in front of everybody and he says, when someone invites you to a banquet, take the lower seat. And he tells a story. And now you have to understand, so this is kind of a common idea for us, especially in Christian and more conservative evangelical circles. We tell these types of stories. Take the lower seat and you'll be invited to the front. In Jesus's world, social order was social hierarchy. If you sat closer to the host, that meant you were higher in society. You were wealthier, you were more powerful, you were more important. And then the farther you are from the host of the banquet, as in this case, the lower you are in society. Okay? So this banquet is kind of a microcosm of society, where the more important people sit closer to each other, and then everybody else kind of expands out from there, and it's sort of a ripple effect. And Jesus takes this idea and he flips it on its head, because in his world, everything is about status or honor. And he says, no, the kingdom of God, the society that he came to establish on earth, and the way he wants his followers to operate is about humility, not status. And it's humility that makes someone great in the kingdom of heaven, in the kingdom of God. And he tells this story about a great banquet where the invitation is extended. Of course, it's always extended to the popular people, to the powerful people, to the wealthy people. And for some reason, they all decide they're going to make up excuses as to why they're not going to come. So have you ever been invited to a party? And the first question you want to ask, but you can't ask the person inviting you, is, I wonder who else is going to be there. I don't want to be the one to show up when none of my friends are there, when all the cool people are going somewhere else. So you have to kind of make sure that people are going to be there that are in the right circles before you say yes. This is a similar etiquette that's taking place in this banquet tale that Jesus tells. The host invites all of the elite and the powerful and the wealthy, and they make up crazy excuses as to why they're not going to come. And it infuriates the host, because he knows These are people who are refusing to come to his party, and they're not actually saying, we just don't want to come. They're making up terrible excuses. So he gets mad and he says, fine, you are no longer invited. And in their place, he goes and he tells his servants, he says, go out and invite anyone and everyone else. Go invite the poor, go invite those who are blind, those who are handicapped, those who are being downtrodden, those who are outside the city gates. Go to the highways and the byways and the alleys, and go to the beggars and go to the homeless. And as many people as you can possibly invite, bring them into my banquet. Let's fill this thing overflowing. I don't want a single person that I previously invited in my house. What Jesus is doing here is shattering the way human systems works, the way society works. And he's saying, look, if you think you're important and that you have a place in God's kingdom because of your importance here on earth, you better think again. Your status on earth does not matter to God. Your money on earth does not matter to God. You could be worth $500 billion. Don't care. So he tells people, don't clamor for the best seats here on earth because it will only lead to ruin. Instead, clamor for the back seat in the room and wait for God to elevate you to the front. Okay? And then next story. He goes and he tells the crowds to count the cost before following him, like a builder planning a tower or a king preparing for war. He wants to make it clear at this point that discipleship in his circle is not a hobby. It's a total reorientation of life. And while he's teaching this, people are muttering about the company he keeps. We've seen this before. People criticize Jesus because he doesn't hang out with the friends that he's supposed to hang out with. He hangs out with tax collectors, with people they call sinners, with outsiders, with the poor, those who don't belong in the center of society. And that's who Jesus gravitates toward. That's who he's hanging out with. And he gets criticized for this. And Jesus doesn't defend himself either. He just tells stories. He tells the story of a lost sheep, tells the story of the lost coin. He tells the prodigal son story in Luke 15. And in every one of these stories, heaven throws a party when something lost is found. That's the vision of this radical mercy that Jesus has been trying to talk about, trying to teach, and trying to demonstrate throughout his entire public campaign. And it's that radical mercy that sets up the next wave of parables where he tells stories about wealth and stewardship and justice. And it's on the heels of this where Jesus tells this parable. We know it as the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, different Lazarus from the one that Jesus raises from the dead in John 11. This rich man, he feasts daily, the story goes, while this beggar starves at his gate. Then they both die. And what we end up seeing is in death, their positions are reversed. The rich man, in fact, is the one who is in torment for eternity, while the poor man, who had nothing on this earth, no status, and in fact, people rejected him because of who he was, he's the one celebrating for eternity. This is a pretty eye-opening story. It's Jesus' way of saying, open your eyes while there's still time. True spirituality and true faith is not a set of beliefs. It's about how you act specifically toward those who are suffering, specifically toward those who are in need. James 2 says this too. Faith without works is dead. Heard a lot of debate about this all my life in Bible studies and in church, in small groups, things like that. Faith without works is dead. James 2. What is works? And there's always a debate. What did James mean by works? What types of works confirm that your faith is true and that you are in fact saved? Interestingly, I never once heard it talked about that the type of works that James is talking about is in the very next verse, but also in the very few, the rest of chapter 2 in the book of James. And James goes on to say, the type of works that confirm your faith are the type of works that prioritize the poor. So he basically says the way you treat the poor confirms or denies the truth of your faith. How you treat the poor. That's it. That's the litmus test. The same thing is going on here in the story of the rich man and Lazarus. That sets up in kind of the narrative of Jesus's campaign here in these final months, the next encounter that we have with a different Lazarus. And this is a decisive moment in Jesus's campaign. This is the raising of Lazarus, his friend, in John 11. You've heard this story. Jesus hears that his friend Lazarus is sick, and he's doing some traveling, but he waits 2 days before going to see him. By the time he arrives, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. It's long enough for all hope to expire. So he's been dead. He's in the tomb. He's starting to decay. Jesus could have been there in time, but he didn't get there in time. So this is that moment, really powerful moment, where Jesus is standing at the tomb with Lazarus's family and all of the onlookers, and Lazarus is dead in the tomb, and Jesus weeps. And then he prays aloud so that everybody can hear, and he shouts, "Lazarus, come out." John 11:43. And this is interesting. The Greek verb here that John uses to describe what Jesus is doing, the crying out, kragadzo. This is an interesting term that means a loud and commanding cry. More than a plea, Jesus is commanding Lazarus to come out. He's not pleading with him. And lo and behold, Lazarus walks out, still wrapped in his burial cloths. And this is a moment in which Jesus takes on death face to face and defeats it by rescuing Lazarus from its jaws. And that miracle, that moment changes everything. Strategically, Jesus heals his friend, right? Brings back to life. But also, that's a moment that just completely lights the fire under those who have been looking for a reason to destroy Jesus. So the leaders in Jerusalem, they don't see this as a moment of compassion. They see this as a moment of defiance and revolution. Caiaphas, the high priest, super powerful, he says it's better for one man to die for the people than for the whole nation to perish in John 11:50. So you've got to understand what's going on here. The Jewish people are under Roman rule. And so the Jewish authorities in this area, they can't just let revolutionaries start fights that could potentially lead to Rome coming in, and instead of just squashing that momentary rebellion, squashing all of the Jewish people along with them. One teammate is not going to be allowed to get the entire team in trouble. So the leaders say, hey, it's better for Jesus to die than the entire nation to perish. But from that day on, they plot to kill Jesus. They start mapping it out. How are we going to do this? And they've got spies plotting to destroy Jesus and disband his movement. He's pretty powerful at this point. And if he's raising people from the dead, whether they believe it's real or not, a magic trick, whatever they might think, that is too powerful, and that needs to be stopped. So the road to the cross begins at this moment, at an empty tomb, ironically. But before Jesus goes to Jerusalem, which he's going to do in the next couple of months, he keeps teaching across in Perea, across the Jordan. He visits Zacchaeus in Jericho, the tax collector. You remember this? He climbs up in the tree to see Jesus, and Jesus says, hey, come down. I'm going to go to your house today, for salvation has come to your house. Again, that's in Luke 19. That's a contrary to everything that the Messiah and that God and someone representing God was supposed to do, to reach a hand out to someone who's actively oppressing God's own people. And Jesus says, hey, even that man belongs. And so he says, today salvation's come to your house. And Jesus actually goes to his house and eats with him. So every encounter in this period, in this scene, Lazarus, Zacchaeus, the lost and the found, the dinner banquet, is preparing the disciples to see that the kingdom of God doesn't operate by fear or power or control, the way so many of our kingdoms and our empires do today. You can watch cable news, and it's going to make you afraid of everything that doesn't fit the mold that they believe you should hold dearly. And Jesus says, no, that's not how it works. We don't operate by fear and control. We operate by restoration. We operate by crossing the boundaries that everyone else is setting up. The miracles, these miracles aren't about spectacle. They're about revealing a pattern. Life where there was previously death, sight where there was blindness, inclusion where there was boundaries. And all of that brings us to this moment of reckoning for the disciples. So for the disciples, this stretch between Hanukkah in the fall and Passover in the spring of 29 is where their belief has to turn into a decision. Are they going to follow when following them no longer feels safe? Will they stay when the costs of following and staying with Jesus gets real? And Jesus is showing them, and I think us too, that faith isn't measured by enthusiasm in these one-off moments of inspiration, but it's measured by endurance, just sticking with him, even when things don't go our way. We might know this as resilience or grit. That's the ability to face pressure without losing your core. Jesus is modeling that in real time, and he's not denying the danger, but instead he's moving through it with a purpose. He's not fixating on outcomes. He stays anchored in his mission, even when it gets really tough. It's this principle that says your mindset determines your reality. We've talked about this just recently. Jesus is inviting his followers into that same inner posture, a faith that reframes fear and fearful moments into focus, and failure and potential for failure and potential for destruction in this case, into formation, into maturity. He's taking what everyone around is saying, man, that's a negative. You should be ashamed. You should be afraid. And he's turning that into an opportunity to see a positive, to see potential for change. Because at the end of the day, it's a really big negative that Jesus has to go through that leads to the most important moment in the history of heaven and earth. And that's the moment Jesus rises from the dead. He has to go through the cross. So he's helping his disciples, and he's helping you and me to reframe how we look at negatives and at failures and at success and at status. So maybe the question that this scene leaves us with is, what if the hard season you're going through isn't punishment, but preparation? What if God's developing your spiritual endurance? He's training you to trust, even though there is a lot of uncertainty around, to act with compassion, even though there's a lot of pressure on you to preserve yourself, and to see resurrection possibilities where others see death, where others see endings. That's what Jesus was teaching his disciples in Perea. And I think that's what he's still teaching us now. Lake Woolmod, go and learn. Come back for scene 21 of the JesusX30 challenge.